construction industry in Canada. So as Caitlin rightly pointed out, my name is Rowan O'Grady. I'm the president of Hayes in Canada, and I've worked with Hayes and in specialist recruitment for almost 20 years now, 9 of those based here in Toronto. And the majority of my time actually with Hayes has been recruiting for the construction industry. So it's really an area I'm always really keen to keep up with, and I know a little bit about it. I'm also joined on the line by Bob Bracalenti, and Bob runs our construction recruitment business here in Toronto. He's been with us, with Hayes for 13 years, I think. I'll have to check that with Bob. And also, we're joined by Russell Carnley, who is Bob's counterpart and runs our construction recruitment business in Vancouver. And I think Russell has also been with us for approximately 13 years, which seems like a coincidence. So Bob and Russell are going to help answer any questions that we get, industry-related questions that I would struggle with at the end. So we're going to have you on the line for about 25 minutes to share the results of the survey, and then we'll have 5–10 minutes at the end to answer any questions that you have. So as Caitlin said, just send the question, use the chat function and send the question directly to me, and we will cover as many of them as we can at the end. So just a little bit about the survey before we start. As most of you know, we produce an annual salary guide, have done for a number of years now, and it shows typical salaries paid across a whole selection of industries and functional areas, and we cross-reference those for level of experience and for the type of company that the role could be found in. The salaries are based on what we see every day in the roles that we fill and in the candidates that we're representing. And it's really become an invaluable reference tool for literally thousands of hiring managers, and we produce literally thousands of copies every year across the country. We're really proud of basically its simplicity and user-friendliness. It's designed as something that you can just pull off your bookshelf, have a quick look and check what salary should an estimator with 10 years experience and working for a mid-sized general contractor in Calgary be paid. If you haven't received a copy of the 2015 guide, just go to hayes.ca and you can easily request a copy there. But then in addition to the guide, and really what we're going to focus on for the session today, is the results of a survey that we conduct on our clients about their own hiring plans, what they're going to do with salary increases this year, how they're feeling about business activity, and their own general sense of confidence in the economy. The survey was actually completed by 4,000 people this year, which is a new record for us. And also we're now able to include multiple years of data. So in the information I'll show you, we've got 4 years of data to show trends in the job market. And that's really valuable for us because it puts us into a position where we can see trends in the marketplace that other people can't. And most importantly, it allows us to be able to provide really valuable advice and recommendations to our clients. So today's webinar, as I said, is specifically about the construction industry. So we've pulled out of all of the responses, we've pulled out responses from people working within the construction industry, which comes to 600 people. They're hiring managers, HR managers, business leaders, working in the industry across multiple different functional areas all across Canada. So all of the statistics that I'm going to share with you over the next 25 minutes are based on the responses from those 600 people in the construction industry. So I'll just kick off with the headlines. These are the key findings, really, and the headlines that we've discovered. I'll just talk you through them. So number one, the construction industry's confidence in the general economy is at a 5-year high. Business activity forecasts have reached a new level of optimism. However, that is not translating into more aggressive hiring plans. Salary increases would appear to be increasingly conservative, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a few minutes. Recruitment appears to be evolving, and it's causing new challenges for employers in the construction industry. And then finally, a thought based on fact that we've discovered, it would appear that employers may actually hold at least some of the cards to addressing Canada's skill shortage within the industry. Okay, so we'll start out with the market outlook. Our question here was about feelings about the economy in general, and whether people feel that the economy in general for 2015 is going to strengthen, weaken, or remain the same. And the first time in 4 years, we see that there's now more people, and by a significant margin, it looks like about 13, 14 points or so to me, believing that the economy will strengthen as opposed to staying the same. And we had said over the last few years that once that happens, that is a very encouraging sign for the economy. I think the most encouraging thing to see, though, is the movement in confidence over the last 3 years, moving from 30% up to now close to 55%, believing that the economy will improve in the coming year. Of course, we know that Canada is really, and probably will be forever, significantly influenced by the US economy. And it's good news coming out of the US economy. It's very robust, and unemployment is so low, and consumer spending is starting to increase. So there's very good news coming from there. And there are other major economies that are producing reasonably good news. But having said that, the fly in the ointment right now seems to be the price of oil and how that's going to affect business confidence, and nobody really knows the answer to that. I should add that the survey was conducted when the price of a barrel of oil was still just over $60. So we'll see. We don't know how much of an effect the change has had on the results that we've got here. Having said that, in most of the key markets that we work in, and we recruit in all the major cities across the country pretty much, we haven't seen any indication that it's really affecting recruitment confidence or forward-looking plans just yet. So we'll wait and see, I suppose, the same as everybody else does. So how about what's happening with business activity levels? So within your own organizations, what's happening with business activity? So let me just explain this slide first, because we've got a few more slides that are designed in a similar way, so I should take a second to explain it. So the shaded bars or lines, vertical lines, they're what the expectation was for that year, and then the solid color lines beside them are what actually happened. So if you look at 2015, we've got over 70% of people who completed the survey are expecting business activity levels in their own organization to increase in 2015, and that's more positive than the previous years. The other thing, we can see there that 55% saw an increase in business levels in 2014, and that compared to 50% in 2013, so on an uptrend there. And the question, I suppose, is, with the higher expectation for 2015, is that going to come through and show the actual proportion of companies growing increase in 2015? And again, we'll have to wait and see. But overall, 55% say they increased last year, 70% saying they expect to do this year. It paints a pretty positive picture. So just looking at it from a regional perspective, the national average is 73% of companies expecting an upturn in their own activity, and Alberta then, probably unsurprisingly, leading the way at 81%, followed by BC. 74% of employers say that they expect business activity to increase, and Ontario at 66%. So kind of as you would expect, but it would be interesting if we did the survey today, what would happen. Okay, how about plans for recruitment in the coming year, and what can we see happening there? So we'll just look at permanent headcount plans, which will probably be the most important or the lion's share of recruitment plans for most of the companies in the industry. So for the last 3 years, the expectation and reality have actually been remarkably similar. Generally speaking, we find that, and this happens outside of the survey, of course, people tend to be optimistic at the start of the year, so there's always going to be some kind of gap between expectation and reality. But having said that, it's still very, very close. You've got, in 2014, just under 50% of companies expecting to grow in staff numbers, and then around 45% actually seeing that happen. In 2015, we've got an almost identical expectation to 2014, so just under 50% expecting to increase staff numbers, 42% expecting to hold steady, and under 10% expecting that they will reduce numbers during the year. Usually the people who expect to reduce numbers, it turns out that it's actually more than that. Makes sense. All things said though, at almost half of employers planning on growing permanent headcount, again, it's positive and it's very, very consistent. You look at the 3 years there, 13, 14, 15, it's almost a carbon copy for each year. The only note of caution here is that we've seen 3 years now where we've had over 60% and now over 70% of employers expecting to see business activity levels increase, but only 40% each year adding headcount. And I think that does raise the question of whether the hiring plans that organizations have, are they adequate to support those kind of growth expectations? And actually, just to back that point up, when you look at it regionally, you can see that in Alberta, where there's been more positive growth for longer periods of time, there's obviously a knock-on and effect of feeling more confident about increasing permanent headcount. So, as I said there, Alberta leading the way again on this, 62% planning to grow staff numbers, followed by BC at 51% and Ontario at 36%. So following the same pattern as the business activity levels. Having said that, as I mentioned earlier, we've yet to see really what effect the price of oil will have on construction in Alberta yet. From our point of view, we've yet to see any material slowdown in hiring. We're still registering the same number of vacancies coming in, the same number of interviews are still happening on these jobs, and offers are being made, and that's right up to today, and we watch it closely. But there is some sense of foreboding in the marketplace, so we're going to have to wait and see if and when that actually translates into changes in people's plans. Looking at temporary hiring very, very quickly, and really this just looks like things will remain the same as previous years. Vast majority of companies, 80%, say they'd hold their use of temporary or contract headcount steady, about 15% planning on accelerating it. Okay, and this is an area that we get asked about a lot. We'll just look at which skill sets, so it's not so much skill sets, but it's really people and project experience are most in demand within construction. The first point to make here is that because there's a continued and growing demand for experienced people in construction across a whole range of projects and a whole range of locations, this is what we would really classify as a hot job market across Canada. But being specific, key areas of demand are obviously for estimators at all levels, but in particular the intermediate level estimator with like 3 to 5 years experience, and in particular experience of high-rise projects, are very much in demand. Or if you wanted to go a step further, electrical estimators across the board are in high demand, but particularly those guys again with like 5, 6, 7 years experience, to the extent that sometimes you'd really wonder where all of the electrical estimators are. They feel like an endangered species sometimes. Same goes for project managers, 5 to 10 years experience as a project manager, and then people with experience in high-rise or projects that are over and above the value of $30 million. They're in very short supply and high demand. And obviously, stating the blatantly obvious, it's being driven by the continued growth in the construction industry in the major cities and with the major infrastructure projects. When you look forward, the real driver behind demand for certain experience or project types obviously is being driven by the projects themselves. So just a quick rundown of what we can see happening. So in BC, obviously you've got the Site C dam that's been talked about a lot, and it looks like it's going ahead in 2015. You've got the LNG projects in northern BC, and that could boost demand, and obviously it will boost demand for civil infrastructure and industrial experience, project managers and estimators. And then you've got the knock-on demand for more ICI experienced people to support the regional growth. With the exception of the oil prices, the population growth continues to drive infrastructure and drive residential projects in Alberta. There's 2 large planned skyscrapers for Calgary coming up, which will increase demand for high-rise project managers there. And likewise for Edmonton, they've got some really ambitious development projects downtown in Edmonton, all around surrounding the new sports arena or sports stadium development project that's planning to happen there. Then in Manitoba, pretty stable market there, but that could be shaken up in 2015. There's the Sky City high-rise centre that's coming up, which would need candidates probably coming from other provinces who have experience of doing those kind of projects. And then you've got the Kias Dam project in northern Manitoba. Again, it will require people to relocate most likely, and puts a lot more pressure on finding people with specifically large-scale civil engineering projects and industrial projects. The GTA then, activity, in fairness in the GTA, probably isn't as urgent, or I suppose, or as aggressive as some of the other areas within Canada, but still very, very good. All revolving around ICI projects. There's still multiple projects happening around the city and slated to come up. So it's certainly not at levels of some places, but it's still very, very healthy nonetheless. Just to talk a little bit about the challenges that people are facing on recruitment within this sector. We all know that when recruitment's difficult, it usually revolves around simple things like there's just a lack of good candidates, or salary levels are increasing. But we wanted to see what else employers are actually concerned about, and we asked this question last year too, and we can compare the results with this year. So after the usual issues, as I said, of skills shortages and salary levels, we've got around 60% of employers starting to be concerned about their own company reputation in the marketplace, 40% thinking about their own company profile, and then you've got, I think it's around 50% or thereabouts of companies starting to think about and maybe being concerned about the resources that they have available within their own organisation to be able to solve these problems. And also, I should just say there, when I say company reputation, I don't think the issue there is anything negative about companies' reputation, more so to do with really whether the candidate pool is even aware of what the company's reputation actually is. And the challenge for employers today that we hear more and more about is just getting their voice heard amongst so much noise out there, and not just noise revolving around the recruitment marketplace, but it's just competing with all of the noise online and in the media every single day. Okay, the other thing to talk about here is just looking at the amount of time it takes to fill a role, and it's a good indicator of the pressure that the job market's under. So we've started to ask about this, and we're going to track it over the next few years. You can see there the majority of employers saying it's taking 2 to 6 months to fill a role, where there's a candidate shortage. And I would say, actually, from our experience, for candidate shortage, you're probably talking closer to the 6 months than the 2 months. There's some very difficult to fill jobs out there. And then asking what is the most difficult level to fill. So not so much worrying about a project type or specific skills. It's more saying what level is most difficult. And clear winner on that one was saying that senior management roles are the most difficult, and you would kind of expect that. But with the time it takes to fill the roles and the issue about finding senior management people, that can really have a knock-on effect in terms of cost and productivity to any business, and even you could start to see projects being put on hold, and we have seen that in some instances. We asked what are the main reasons that a new hire doesn't work out, and not surprisingly, the top 2 were lack of skills match to the role, and then just plain straight up lack of personality fit. So just as an aside point to make here, bearing in mind how difficult it can be to find a good candidate and how long you have to spend trying to find them in the first place, getting the hiring decision right at hiring time is absolutely essential. And we always advise our clients to try and articulate in as much detail as possible what it is that the individual really has to have. What are you really looking for in a candidate? And can all of the stakeholders actually come to some kind of agreement as to what those things are? Too often, companies are trying to hire and they say, well, we're just looking for somebody, estimated with 5 years experience, and as it turns out, there was detail as to specifically what they wanted to see in that person's personality or in their background that they didn't establish in the first place. So I think being able to articulate clearly and agree what it is that you really want is very, very important. And then trying to challenge yourself on how accurate that is. Are they absolute essentials, or are they just things that you could classify as nice to have? And then the final challenge, of course, comes that even with that in mind, then you need to be able to show the discipline to actually stick to it. And a phrase that we frequently use is if you're interviewing a candidate and there's some doubt about them, then there should be no doubt about them, and our advice would be don't hire them. We did a separate survey last year to look at how companies were evolving their own recruitment strategies and how they were using social media, and there's some interesting stuff here. The short version of what we found was that most companies see the need to use social media and they want to increase their online profile as an employer, but the majority of companies are actually not doing that. I think it was 20% of employers are actually using social media in some way to recruit. The other thing that came out of it was there was a general sense of reservation or fear as to the risks around having a higher online presence. 77% of employers said that they were concerned that how social media could have a negative impact on people's perception of their brand, and that kind of makes sense because we all know that one of the challenges of social media, and if you're active on there, is you're going to attract some form of negative attention regardless of what organization you are, and that can be a scary thing. But then specifically to do with recruitment, it turned out that 64% are concerned with how social media channels will negatively affect their ability to recruit. So just to summarize here, there's a pressure to find particular skill sets or project experience. You've got a desire to use social media, but also a general sense of fear about how social media will affect the company brand and the company's ability to hire. So as a recruiter or a HR manager within a construction company, there is a real conundrum and a real challenge there. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the skill shortage here, as it's something that can have, and is having, a real and quite negative effect on some companies. There's been some talk in the media over the last year. Actually, there's talk in the media every year about the skill shortage, but I thought it was interesting what happened in 2014. There appeared to be, at one point, there was clear agreement that there was a skill shortage. Then it was tabled that maybe there isn't, and it seems like recently the belief that there is actually a skill shortage seems to be gathering pace again, so it's all very confusing. I think from our point of view it's very clear actually, and to us there's a clear shortage of highly skilled people in very specific areas like the ones I've just listed. And I think if you're an employer in the construction industry in Canada, try talking to that person and telling them that there isn't a shortage of estimators with 5 years experience, because there is. But equally, I would say there's clearly a challenge to find work if you're an unskilled person or if you're at an entry level, and that's absolutely a fact. So I think both sides of that are true, but it should also be clear that both are very, very different situations. But anyway, in any event, we asked whether Canada suffers from a skills shortage. 73% said that they believe that to be true. And then we asked whether your own industry, i.e. the construction industry, is affected by a skills shortage, and 94% believe that to be the case. We then asked, what do you think are the main reasons contributing to the skills shortage in your industry? And there's two clear leaders, 32% and 34% respectively, were a lack of training and professional development and a lack of people entering the industry. We then asked, what is being done in your own organisation to address the skills shortage, and it came out that 28% are committing to training within their organisation, and you've got about a third, or a little bit more, actually a third exactly, that are combining roles and creating hybrid roles. And I think that point on combining roles, that can actually be a good solution. It creates far greater efficiencies, obviously, but you know, it does create a lot more pressure on the individual or person who's doing two jobs. But anyway, the clear belief, I think, that there's not enough training and development in the industry, but then you've got less than a third of employers actually committing to changing that in their own organisation, is a noteworthy thing. The lack of skilled candidates actually has an effect then on organisations, and we wanted to really find out a little bit more about that and find out specifically what kind of effects was it having. 1/3 of employers in the industry said that the skills shortage was actually affecting their own business activity levels, or at times holding them back from growing. So then we said, how is it actually affecting business activity? And 54% said that it was affecting productivity directly. And as we know, the construction industry revolves around two things, and that is time and money. You've got to deliver the project within the time scale, and you must deliver it within the budget. And when productivity is being affected, it's probably the most damaging for a construction firm at a really fundamental level, and therefore it is a fundamentally important thing. What effect is the skill shortage having within companies then and on their existing staff? 20% said that it's causing increased stress leaves, 30% saying they're seeing reduced levels of office morale, and then you've got a very dominant portion, 60%, saying it's causing general inefficiencies in their own organisation as a result. Just a point to make here, that I think, and we've kind of seen this earlier on, I think there's a lot of organisations who are trying to do more with the same people, trying to do more business with the same people or with the same number of people, and that's an attractive business thing to do, but it does come with a health warning. I think your plans to keep up, you're hoping, if you're planning on keeping up with your expectations, that could be impeded by not being able to attract the right people, and obviously it could be really impeded by losing some of your own very valuable people, so you can only sail so close to the wind on that. So what are employers actually doing to respond to this issue and these challenges? Highly effective fix is obviously the improvement in processes and policies to just make them less cumbersome, and that is the most popular solution. You know, for example, could we complete this process in 3 steps instead of 10? Another one that's very popular, as I've mentioned already, is combining roles. Efficient way of dealing with the lack of people, obviously comes with a consideration. You've got companies changing organisation structures, which I think is very encouraging, and it's a good step. And that's about empowering more people in the organisation to be able to make their own decisions. And then you've got, also encouragingly, you've got training listed in there as a solution, and it's good to see. I think that's almost, yeah, that's in the top half of solutions. So there's some good positive stuff happening there. But I would say that, you know, a really sustainable business requires development and promotion of people within the organization. That means having an effective succession plan, and you can see succession is way down on the list there. And also we asked, does your company have a succession plan? But only 36% of employers say that they actually do have one. Another very interesting insight is that a fair proportion of employers actually believe that resolving the skill shortage is actually in their own hands. Just under a third saying that this is their responsibility. So in other words, if companies themselves were taking a long-term view and spending time bringing in entry-level people, providing robust training and development within their own organization, in time, the skill shortage would alleviate. But, of course, it's very hard to take a long-term view when you've got short-term pressures to deal with and tight margins to manage. Okay, on to compensation then, which is the main event. How is all of this affecting salary levels and plans for salary levels? So we ask each year how much salaries were increased in the previous year, and we can show that from 2011, along with the plans for 2015. So there's a clear movement and a trend there of more and more companies offering increases below the 3% mark, and you've got a reduction in companies offering over the 3% mark. Bear in mind that that's all happening at a time when employers in the industry are feeling more confident about the economy, and we can see they're seeing business activity levels continue to increase, and expect so again that will happen this year. So why is this happening? You know, why is it not that there's more of a confident move on salary increases when everything else is pointing towards confidence? And on conversation internally, we think this is happening because of two clear reasons. Number one, if you look at 2011, there was almost 50% of companies there offering over a 3% increase, and that was really a rebound after the recession, and a correction needed to take place after a few years of zero level increases. And I think there's less and less need to do that now after a couple of years of giving over 3% changes. I think the second point, and this is a fact of life for a lot of companies in the construction industry, yeah, there's a general optimism about the economy, and yes, optimism about future business for your own company, but that really is tempered with the reality that margins in the industry are very, very tight, and competition is very intense. And you know, we see this every day. Companies are running very, very tight ships, and they have to do that to be able to compete. So, you know, there's a sobering element to it. But of course, there's an exception, as there always is, and the exception in this instance is Alberta. We can see there that for the over 3% increase, that's being offered by 60% of employers in Alberta. In Ontario and BC, that's closer to 40% of employers offering over 3% when you add all the, you know, 3 to 6, 6 to 10, 10 plus. But really, less than 3% is the norm in Ontario and BC. And I should say here that the construction industry stands out across the industries that we recruit for. It's universally a confident industry in Canada, where the expectation of growth is very obvious. But as I said, there's still a conservative approach taken to salary levels in most areas, and that probably is not a bad thing. Okay, so outside of specific project experience driving salary growth, how about level of seniority? So we asked respondents to answer where are they feeling wage pressure, and the area that there appears to be the most wage pressure is at a mid-level to senior level management category, with around 70% of employers saying that they're seeing that, and then at the junior end not so much, at about 30%. 38% saying their company doesn't offer competitive salaries or at the market rate, and 57% saying the number one reason that the candidate turns down the job offer was because the salary was too low. So just to kind of summarize about compensation, we've got most employers holding steady with a less than 3% salary increase for 2015. 70% of companies there say they're feeling wage pressure at the management level, and close to 40% or more feeling some kind of sensitivity towards the salaries they're paying and also offering to new employees. If 2015 delivers the growth and activity that the 70% of companies expect, I would expect that next year we could see a shift back towards over 3%, but like all things, we will wait and see. Okay, how about benefits then, and what companies are planning on doing with their benefits? We asked, what are the most influential factors when it comes to benefits on recruitment and retention? So which benefits most influence recruitment and retention? And vacation there tops the chart of benefits, but I'll come back to that in a second. Career progression, if you can classify career progression as a benefit, that comes in at second place. But as I just said a couple of minutes ago, you've only got about 36% of companies actually have a succession plan in place. I think that's a big opportunity for employers, and it doesn't cost anything. You know, we will say to our clients, think about how impactful it would be to be able to show someone in the organization the succession plan, to be able to show them where they could fit in and where they could be in 5 years' time, and if they're going to be at this level in 5 years' time, what do they need to do and achieve in the next 12 months? And you end up with a far more engaged, motivated, an excited individual who knows that there's a plan for them, and it has such an impact on retention. The same thing goes for recruitment. If you can refer to your succession plan over 5 years to people that you're looking to hire, that will separate you out, because the majority of companies do not have that. As I said there, vacation is the most influential benefit on recruitment and retention. We just said we point out something here that could be of use from a constructive point of view. Not on the slide, but something that we had asked also in the survey. Respondents said that they had picked improving flexible work options as a priority that they wanted to improve in 2015. But you can see there, when it comes to how influential it is on recruitment and retention, it's significantly down the pecking order. Despite the fact that vacation is such an influential factor for employees, only 16% of employers are looking at that or giving it consideration to improve. So again, that could be a big opportunity for you to gain a competitive advantage over some of the other companies in the industry. Okay, so pretty much done. We're just going to summarize the findings, give you some recommendations, and then if there are any questions, we will do our best to answer them. So I'll start out with key findings. So just to summarize, as I said, confidence in the economy, optimism for future business activities at a 4-year high. That is not converting into more aggressive plans, as companies are really hoping for improved levels of productivity. That in turn is placing more pressure on existing staff. The skill shortages in specific areas and specific project types, they're clearly present, and that is just set to continue and accelerate. There's a continued trend towards less than 3% salary increases, with the exception of Alberta. And then finally, most employers are taking a short-term view in solving the skill shortage in their own business, and I must say probably understandably so. As far as our recommendations are concerned, a couple of key things here that we think would make a difference. The first one is to start thinking about your own talent pipeline, not really for today, but more so for tomorrow. And there should be a long-term succession plan. People say, well, we don't know what the business is going to look like in 5 years, but it's okay to make assumptions, and it's okay that it's in general terms. In 5 years, we should be approximately this size. This is the kind of structure we would need. We would need to have this number of VPs. And even that is enough to say there's a plan, and that's enough to be able to say to somebody where potentially they could fit in. You're not promising anything, but you are showing that you're thinking about it. Using temporary and contract staff, we're seeing happening more and more, and that can be used to alleviate pressures on the current workforce, and it's a very good investment in the current workforce to say, look, we're trying to help you here. On the issue of trying to get your own employer brand out there, you do have to be proactive about this. You've got to be proactive about getting it out there, but the first step really is trying to define what is your own value proposition. So an EVP, or employer value proposition, is just a fancy way of saying, why would somebody want to come and work for your organization as opposed to somebody else? It's got to be clear and well thought out, and you've got to use digital channels to try and get it out there and get some attention for your company. When it comes to salaries, you've got to be competitive and move with the market, but you certainly don't have to pay the most, because only one company pays the most, and you probably don't want to be those guys. But really, our advice is try and think beyond the basic salary with your job offer, and try and use performance-related bonuses. We find that a lot of people are willing to accept a level of risk if there's potential to earn more. So it could be a slightly lower salary, but there's opportunity to earn more with performance-related bonuses and incentives. And then finally, look at your existing workforce, try and evaluate their potential, and then you've got to invest in training and development over a long period of time. It doesn't have to be a lot, but there does have to be a feeling that you are investing in training and development. And in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time, these guys will have the experience that you want, and it really is the only way of fighting that medium to long-term problem. So, okay, so that's everything on the presentation of the results. So I hope you've picked up a couple of things that could be of use to you in your own business. Thank you very much for dialing in. If there are questions, let me just check to see if we got anything. There we go. It's always the first question. Can we get a copy of the presentation? You can, because we've recorded the webinar. We'll post it onto our YouTube channel, and you can go in and look at all of the slides whenever you like, and you can turn off the audio so you don't have to listen to me talking, and just look at it in peace. So that's on there. But yeah, we'll see if we have any other questions. As I said at the beginning, you can go to hayes.ca/salary guide to request your own copy. If you need help or advice on anything, I'm only too happy to help. So drop me an email. You see my email address is up there. As I said, we've got Russell here, Russell currently in Vancouver, who can help answer some of the questions that we have too. So let's see what we've got. So we've done the traditional, can we get a copy of the presentation? Let's see what else we have. Why do you think there's such a shortage of people in the construction industry? Well, I think that's, well, like if you look at the statistics that we have, the first reason is, and the one that people will cite a lot, is there's just a lack of new people entering the industry. I should say that almost every industry that we recruit for, every industry says we're not doing a good enough job attracting young people to come and work in our industry. So I'm not sure where all the young people are actually going, but everybody feels that that's an issue, and it's probably just there's so many options for people, so many different jobs that they could take. But I think that's a huge contributor to it, and I believe that there has to be a closer link between the general contracting companies, the construction companies out there, and the colleges who are providing education. And then the follow-on from that, of course, is that you need companies actually engaging with that, and you need them committing to hiring these guys when they come out of college a couple of years, almost whether they need them or not, as an investment in the future. Somebody actually said to me recently, but if I do that and I train them up, in 3 years, 5 years' time, they're just going to leave and go and work for somebody else. And that's a fair point, I think. But I think if we all have that attitude, then I don't know where we're going to end up. So I think that it's those two things. It's lack of people entering, and then it's how committed are we to providing training and development. Okay, another question. Canada has many high-rise projects underway, and there seems to be more coming up in the coming years. How is that affecting the talent pipeline? I'm not sure how to answer that. How is that affecting the talent pipeline? Well, actually, you could say, Russell, if you're on the line there, like, what's your view on how much of a shortage is there people with high-rise projects? How much of an effect is that having on companies' confidence in being able to do projects? Like, how much of a problem is it?
Well, I mean, it doesn't really to do with how many people are coming into the industry, but I think people with high-rise backgrounds are becoming increasingly mobile. We've seen a lot of people moving across the country with all the high-rise projects that are coming up in Alberta. There's been a big movement of people from both Ontario and to BC to take up those projects. But what we have seen also is quite a few clients who actually are not moving forward with projects or even tendering for projects because they don't have the confidence that they can actually identify the right people. Obviously that's something that we do our best to help with, but there is just a general shortage of people with those capabilities, and it just seems to be getting worse as the high-rise sort of development industry expands in Calgary and Edmonton, which previously we haven't really had. So
Yeah, you'd wonder, will we see more people moving out of Toronto? Say there's been a huge amount of high-rise, and we'll start seeing them moving to places where the work is.
Yeah, I think so.
That is what we'll see, and the salaries will increase along with that. Question here: with the crash of oil prices, will Alberta construction companies seem a lot more cautious? Will they have lower levels of increases? Will they cancel projects? Yeah, like so far, we haven't seen a major change in that. I think most companies are saying, well, you know, this change in oil price almost doesn't make sense, and it will return, so we'll continue on. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't think the price of oil could be that low. How long could it be that low and not have a knock-on effect into the construction industry in Alberta? And then, if it does have a genuine knock-on effect to the construction industry in Alberta, then it's only a matter of time before it starts to have a knock-on effect with other places, and then we'd have the opposite problem. We'd have too many people to go around, and it might be difficult to find a job. But let's not say that. Why did I say that? So we'll see what happens with it. But yeah, I can't imagine the companies would just be completely oblivious to it and keep going. To me, it's how long it stays low as opposed to the prices that it's actually got to. So we'll wait and see. What else? How does hiring plans for the construction industry stack up against other professions? So that's probably a HR person's asking that question. Generally speaking, it's far more aggressive. The two areas that we've found where there's far more opportunities and there's got a lot more of an aggressive job market is the construction industry and the IT sector. They're definitely the hottest areas in Canada. We've done webinars and surveys actually all this week for other areas like in accounting and finance. We've got more coming up later on in the week. But if you look at stuff like finance, human resources, procurement, so jobs that you'd find within construction industries, it's not as hard to find people within those support functions as you would get compared to the frontline people, i.e. the estimators and the project managers. But then again, I suppose counter to that would be finding, say, accountants specifically with experience working with general contractors. Those guys are hard to find. Not as bad as an estimator, but they are hard to find, and their salaries have increased as well. Okay, good. Let's see. Is there anything else? I do not think there is anything else. If there is, and we haven't got to answer it, just email me directly, and I'll email you back. But that's it. Okay, so that's all the time we have. How did we do? I think we kind of stayed on time, maybe 5 minutes over. But thank you very much for dialing in. I appreciate your time. I hope you found it useful. And thank you for everybody who completed the survey and who worked on putting the report together and in creating the presentations. We really, really appreciate it. So that is it. All the best and good luck to you for 2015.
Thanks.